Joining me on the Newshour tonight is Lisa Bloom, attorney for 11 victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Thank you very much, Lisa, for joining me on the Newshour. I want to ask you, Ms. Bloom, these are interesting times in the United States of America and a testing time for the Trump administration. There is growing pressure on his administration to release all the Epstein files. Firstly, Ms. Bloom, as someone who has represented 11 victims of the abuse of Jeffrey Epstein, how deep did the rot run and what was the scale and magnitude of the cover-up?
Well, thank you, and that's a very important question. The rot runs very deep and very wide. So we've seen a lot of names of prominent people, including the U.S. President Donald Trump, our former president, Bill Clinton, prominent attorneys like Alan Dershowitz, the current UK ambassador to the US, and many, many others. Now, that does not mean that all of these men were involved in sexual abuse, but they certainly knew Jeffrey Epstein, and the recent release of the birthday book really reveals kind of an old boy network, laughing, making fun of the fact that they knew that he was at least involved with very young girls sexually, and that this was all just a big joke to everyone. So I've represented 11 victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and this is extraordinarily painful for them.
But Ms. Bloom, here's the problem. And this is why many are apprehensive about the release of the files. They say, for instance, that one cannot hold Trump guilty of any abuse just because he knew Jeffrey Epstein. The same applies to the others who knew Jeffrey Epstein. There cannot be guilt by association. How would you respond to that defense that comes up?
Well, that's true. Donald Trump is not guilty of sexual abuse because of the birthday book. Donald Trump is guilty of sexual abuse because a jury in a different case said that he was, in the case against E. Jean Carroll, which has been upheld on appeal. And over 20 women have accused Donald Trump of sexual misconduct, including 4 who I represented. So, did he get involved with the girls with Jeffrey Epstein? Well, I certainly think that the recent drawing, which Donald Trump denies, he said he didn't do it. He says that's not his signature. Okay, well, a lot of news organizations have lined up the signature against others by him at that time period, and they are strikingly similar. If indeed that is him, I think that is smoking gun evidence. There is a black pen drawing of what looks like not a woman's body, but a girl's body. And it refers several times to a secret between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. You know, Donald Trump is still alive. Jeffrey Epstein is not. He could tell us what that secret is if there's an innocent explanation. But the writing about the secret is on the same page with the drawing of the girl's body. So I think there's really only one conclusion to any reasonable person about what that secret is.
Well, so there was a press conference by the victims, and it was also a bipartisan press conference with both Democrats and Republicans present there. The Trump administration claims that most files have been released already. The critics claim that most of the information was already in the public domain. But what's in the remaining files? Trump has called all this a Democratic hoax. What do you think?
Well, first of all, right now it's the Republicans blocking the release of the file. During the election, it was the Republicans who said they were running on the platform that in part they wanted to release the Epstein files. Then the U.S. Attorney, Pam Bondi, took a look at the files and said Donald Trump was mentioned in there, and then they changed their position. They don't want to release them. It is true that a lot of what's in the files has already been released, but it's also true that there is new material in there, including this shocking birthday book that was just released. So I can't understand why anyone would want to block release of these files. You know, these women have suffered long enough for decades. Nobody believed them when they started coming forward in the late 1990s. In the early 2000s, they were vilified. They were attacked by Epstein's attorneys. Finally, there was a little bit of justice in 2008, And then in 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested and more women came forward. But this has been going on for a very long time. The files, I think any reasonable person would say, if there is a possible pedophile ring and other people are involved, the files should be released. Let the chips fall where they may. It's true that not everybody who's named is guilty, but some people were complicit and they need to be brought to justice.
Well, the birthday book entries paint a chilling picture of young women being treated as objects for entertainment. What do these new files add to our understanding of Epstein's sexual pyramid scheme, and how do they help corroborate what survivors have been saying all along?
Yes. So overall, the picture is a lot of wealthy and prominent people thought it was really funny to make jokes and drawings and cartoons and poems about Jeffrey Epstein's behavior with women. This was just all a big joke. And this is consistent with what my clients have said from the beginning, which is they were terrified to come forward because Jeffrey Epstein was constantly name dropping all the prominent people that he hung out with. There were photos of him with presidents and prominent people. And these women who might have been 17 years old from the wrong side of the tracks, as we say, thought, how could I possibly stand up against somebody like this? So they continued to submit to the sexual abuse, or they went away, dealt with their trauma on their own. And now we see this kind of behavior being laughed at by these prominent men. More specifically, there is a drawing in the birthday book. It says 1983. There's a picture of Jeffrey Epstein with a bunch of little girls giving them a balloon. So he's grooming them. And then 2003, 20 years later, there's a drawing of him with 4 topless young women giving him a massage. The massages were really the centerpiece of the sexual abuse. What my clients have talked about for a long time is that they were lured in with the promise of, usually by Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman who they trusted because she was a woman, for $300, just give my boyfriend a massage. That's all that will be, and you can have $300 in cash. And to them, that was a lot of money at the time. They get lured in, they're alone with him, and then he sexually assaults them. So the idea that this was all just funny to people is really a slap in the face to the victims.
Well, but Ms. Bloom, there was a fallout between Trump and Epstein, was there not? There was a rival bid that both presented over the purchase of a property. That was one of the reasons. The other was Trump discovering that Epstein had misbehaved with the daughter of a man known to Trump. So the fallout is reported to have happened in the year 2004. Do you believe this, or do you think the friendship continued even after 2004?
It's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the facts are about their falling out. Donald Trump has said more recently they had a falling out because Jeffrey Epstein, quote, stole one or more of his employees at Mar-a-Lago. We know that Virginia Giuffre, who for a long time was the most well-known Epstein accuser, she did work at Mar-a-Lago in the spa, and Jeffrey Epstein did hire her away. I don't know if that's who Donald Trump was referring to or somebody else, but Donald Trump, clearly talks about women and his employees as though that they are his property, that they were stolen from him. And there's also corroboration for that in the birthday book, where there's this joke large check where a girl is being sold from Epstein to Trump for $22,500. And it says full depreciation, like she's a car or a computer, and gets depreciated over time, meaning her value goes down over time, maybe because she's aging out of the very young age that Jeffrey Epstein liked. Now, we don't have any evidence that Donald Trump was involved in that particular page. It may have been somebody else who did that as a joke about Epstein and Trump, but nevertheless, it does show, again, the attitude of these prominent men about girls, that they could be bought and sold, that it was all just a big joke to them.
Well, Ms. Bloom, you may be bound by lawyer-client confidentiality based on what the victims you represented may have conveyed to you in person, but can you tell us about whether they have named Trump in their testimonies or in public? I mean, it's important.
I can't comment on that.
But as a follow-up, let me also tell you that I did speak to 2 victims last week, and Lisa Phillips and Rena O told me that there was no Trump in their files.
Well, I can just say, based on what the U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has said, that his name does come up in the files. And with this first release of the birthday book, we saw his name multiple times in that birthday book. So listen, we know that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were friendly up until they had their falling out. There's lots of pictures of them together. Donald Trump was quoted in the press in the early 2000s saying that Jeffrey Epstein was a great guy and he likes his women young. So we know that they had a close relationship, at least for a period of time.
Well, Prince Andrew's name has come up in connection with Jeffrey Epstein as well. You called the new claims about Prince Andrew allowing a woman to sit on the Queen's throne sickening and said nothing was off limits to these men. What can you tell us about the claims being made out about Prince Andrew?
Well, it is unfortunate that Prince Andrew's name continues to come up as well, right? That Prince Andrew over and over again is connected with Jeffrey Epstein, even after Jeffrey Epstein's conviction in 2008. And one of Epstein's assistants, which is a young woman, we don't know if that particular one was trafficked or not, but most of them say that they were, was brought to I guess, Buckingham Palace and was allowed to sit on the Queen's throne, because men in power, in this group of men, it's very clear that they thought they could do anything, that rules didn't apply to them. And then, in fact, the most fun thing was to break rules in terms of abusing girls and, not even respecting the sanctity of the Queen's throne. I just found that shocking.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. But since you mentioned the British ambassador to the United States as somebody who was part of that ring, he's been sacked by the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. The Prime Minister has taken that call after the expose and the Epstein connection. But as far as the US is concerned, we've not seen any accountability surfacing yet. You think that's strange?
Absolutely. And that's the first I'm hearing that about the UK ambassador, and I'm glad to hear that. I can tell you from one of my clients, who we just use her first name, Rosa. Rosa has said to me, when I was a young girl and I was being abused by Epstein, I trusted the people in power to protect me, to serve me. I thought they were there very naively to help girls like me. And to see them all just involved with Jeffrey Epstein at the expense of so many young girls is very upsetting to her. So I think that will be good news for her, that there was some accountability, that this ambassador was so friendly with Epstein even after his conviction. After his 2008 conviction, there's no excuse for anyone to continue to be friendly with him. But he was able to resurrect his reputation and his career by continuing to associate with people. So I'm glad to see that accountability, and you're correct that we have not seen that in the U.S.
Well, let's talk about the circumstances surrounding Epstein's death. When I spoke to Rina O, she said there's more to his death than meets the eye, and she was not willing to believe that he had committed suicide. There's the entire controversy surrounding the missing minute in the CCTV footage as well from the prison. Where do you stand on this?
Yes, I would really like to see full and thorough investigation by impartial people. Listen, anyone connected to the Trump administration is there to protect Trump. And I'm not saying Trump had anything involved to do with his death, but we need an impartial investigation by people who have no interest in the outcome. And he probably did commit suicide, but I just don't know. I wasn't there. The missing time on the tape is suspicious. The fact that two jailhouse employees at the same time fell asleep, and is that coincidences make me very suspicious. I will say that.
Well, did you follow the news about a Department of Justice official speaking to an undercover reporter who he thought was a date, saying that the names of Republicans and conservatives will be redacted from the Epstein files, while those of Democrats and liberals will be retained? The DOJ then issued a clarification showing a statement by the same man who said he was merely claiming what was being said in the media. What's your own view on that?
I have not, but of course it's true, because this is the way, it makes me very sad as an American that this is the way our country is being run right now. If it helps the Republicans, then it gets released. If it doesn't, it does not get released. I mean, if a prominent Republican activist sadly gets shot yesterday, the flags are flown at half-mast. When Democrats get shot, as in the case of Minnesota state legislatures a couple months ago, there are no flags at half-mast. So, there's clearly a bias. And we also know from the recording of the Ghislaine Maxwell interview in jail that was released that when she mentioned members of Trump's own cabinet were connected to Jeffrey Epstein, there was no follow-up question. And instead, the attorney doing the interview just changed the subject and moved on to something else. The obvious follow-up question would have been, who? Who are you talking about? What are the names of the Trump cabinet members that you are referring to? But they didn't ask about that. Ghislaine Maxwell and her lawyer clearly know what she needs to say to get, she's already been transferred to a better prison, a minimum security prison. And to get released or to get clemency, she knows that she has to say that Trump was not involved, that no prominent Republicans were involved. And that's what she's going to say. That's what anybody would say when they're looking at 20 years in prison and they want clemency.
True, rather suspicious, something that I think everyone in this world would want to know answers to. But I would reckon that you would remember the infamous Trump tape that went viral ahead of the presidential elections in 2016. It was a conversation from 2005 where Trump was speaking in disparaging terms about a woman. Can that ever be held up in a court of law against Trump as indicative, perhaps, of a trend or a tendency? Should there be any connection drawn to the Epstein files?
So, right, we call that the Access Hollywood tape, where he brags about when you're a star, you can do anything you want, you can grab women by their private parts, right? And as to whether that could be used in court against him, yes. As a trial lawyer, I can tell you, yes, absolutely. In fact, it has been used against him in the sexual abuse trial brought by a woman named E. Jean Carroll, who won her case against him. A jury found that he sexually assaulted her, and that's been upheld on appeal. And more than 20 women have come forward and accused him of sexual misconduct very, very credibly. So I think that is important evidence. When somebody brags about what they can do to women when they are a star, this is consistent with everything that we've been talking about today, that a lot of these prominent men felt that it was a perk of power, that they could take advantage of women. That was one of the fun things that, like a sports car that you get when you are rich and powerful. You can do anything you want to women because women and girls are just objects to you. So that could absolutely be used if there were another court case against Trump, which I doubt, because those cases are very hard to fight. It takes years and years. I would be very surprised if there are any new ones.
Well, Ms. Bloom, I have the last final question to you. Actually, it's a two-part question. Are you in a position to divulge who else is on those files? Are there celebs or politicians? And secondly, is this going to be a long, drawn-out legal battle, or do you expect a verdict sooner than later?
So I don't have other names that I can give you right now, and I do have to be careful about naming people publicly because I could get sued for defamation. I can tell you that on behalf of the 11 Epstein victims who I've represented, we have fought two battles and we've won both of them. One of them was against the Jeffrey Epstein estate to get compensation to them for the trauma and the injuries that they endured, and we won for all 11 of them. We then had a second fight against JP Morgan Bank, which is I think it's the biggest bank in the U.S., and they were found to have been complicit and helped Jeffrey Epstein. For example, he had large cash withdrawals that the bank is required to report because that could be evidence of a crime. Criminals often want to deal in cash, right? And JP Morgan was not reporting it as they were supposed to. There was a big New York Times investigation that was just released about that. So we also filed claims against JP Morgan on behalf of all 11 and fought for them and won against JP Morgan for all 11. We are now looking at the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. as to whether they had any liability to the women, because they had a lot of reports against Jeffrey Epstein as early as the early 2000s, and they basically did nothing. They covered it up and, in fact, allowed him to get a real sweetheart state deal in 2008, which allowed him to escape liability and to continue abusing girls even after that, like my client Rosa, who was abused after 2008. So we're looking not just at individuals, but organizations and entities who were part of this. You know, we have to address all of the accountability if we want to stop this cover-up for prominent people in the future, and we want to protect girls and boys who are victims of abuse in the future. We have to have full accountability.
Well, Ms. Bloom, more power to you, who's fighting on behalf of the 11 victims, and we do hope and pray. All Indians here do hope and pray that there is justice and there is closure for the victims of Epstein, and that the truth comes out, because it is really the least that we can do to the victims of this entire power circle that carried on, completely taking advantage of vulnerable women at the receiving end. Thank you very much, Ms. Bloom, for joining me on the Newshour tonight.